I'll start the recording here. And I'm going to ask you all to kind of turn your cameras on, and I'll do the screenshot, and we'll go ahead and start the class. Okay. Ken, I saw your camera on, but now you turned it off. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, so this is oh boy, I'm losing track. This is chapter 2. I think we're in week 3, and I wanted to make sure that again, we get through some of this administrative stuff, because that's the stuff that the grades are going to kind of be based on. So I want to make sure that you guys are all on board with that. So this chapter is called Media Naturalness, and we'll go through the chapter. Now, some of you might be thinking, how come we're not talking about specific social media and other communication platforms? And I think the key thing is to think about how these particular chapters, as they talk about media richness and media naturalness, how does it apply to whatever mode of communication you might be using? And I think what's important to keep in mind is that every platform, whether it's email or text or Facebook or Instagram or Zoom, each one has its own characteristics. And what you should be thinking about is, how does this chapter, whether it's talking about media richness or media naturalness, how does it relate to the platform that you might be using or exploring? So, that's kind of how this book is structured. It sort of breaks down some of the key components that probably more so as a researcher or an academic, looking at these computer mediated communications, what they look for. And so I think if you approach it from that standpoint, it makes sense why they cover it in this sort of detail. So let me what happened to my PowerPoint? Hold on for just a second here. Okay. Oops. I lost my cursor. So hold on. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see this slide deck? Chapter 2, Media Naturalness. Somebody give me a thumbs up or say yes.
Yeah, we can hear it. I see it.
Okay. Okay, so let me kind of go through this. So again, first chapter, media richness. This chapter is about naturalness, and the way they look at naturalness is, again, comparing it to sort of this gold standard of face-to-face. And when the way this particular approach to naturalness is, looking at it from an evolution standpoint, and how we as human beings have kind of evolved into being able to communicate in the way we do, with others. And it's a lot of natural things that would enable us to see and hear and smell and taste. So a lot of it is relating to the evolution of the human and how we have gotten to the point of evolving to this pretty high form of communications. So that's how they start about, sort of comparing what media naturalness is all about. And, they kind of talk a little bit about, dating and how some characteristics might be appealing to successful kind of hooking up and, and procreating. And I thought it was kind of funny, but, it's all about how the human has continued to evolve and which has resulted basically in us being able to further kind of develop our communication skills, and that's basically where they consider kind of like the gold standard. And then the other kind of naturalness is the idea of being in the same place. That's the idea of co-location, and then the same time. That's the idea of synchronicity or synchronously, which is different from asynchronous. So these are some of the kind of key components of this idea of naturalness. So as we go through this chapter, that's kind of like the basis for the analysis. So this idea of human communication and the evolution of it. So the children inherit genes from their parents. So this is the evolution of how we've, over the tens of thousands of years, been able to develop this skill for communicating. Whether it's mutating or finding benefit in being a better communicator, that has contributed to survival and through the mating of humans. So, and in natural selection, I guess the idea of the skill that has been beneficial kind of gets carried on to the next generation. So I think as we've evolved into this highly sophisticated being that has the ability to communicate. Now, obviously, there's other animals in the animal kingdom that have very sophisticated communication skills, and they use a different set of communicating. But in the context of this computer-mediated communications, we're sort of comparing it to the way we've evolved this ability to communicate face to face, with other human beings. So people are skilled at face to face conversation and are able to interpret the verbal interaction based on audio and visual cues. And then, the idea of the evolution of human conversation in this space and time. Space and time basically means, like I said, co-location. Are we interacting with people in the same space and time? And, from that standpoint, we've developed a pretty sophisticated capability, to get our messages across. Yeah. And then from a synchronous standpoint, we have evolved to successfully do this at the same time. So when it's face to face, it's happening at the same time. Now, as we enter into the whole world of computer mediated, that's when asynchronous comes in. So that's kind of a technology that's relatively new. I think the human has evolved and developed based on synchronous. Now, with that said, I can imagine when messages were delivered by hand. You could think of the kind of like the Pony Express, right? And people were handwriting letters. and that's more of an asynchronous mode of communications. Uh, the beauty of computer mediated communications is that a lot of that now has been made more immediate. So even email, as soon as you hit send, it's almost immediate that the recipient will get it. In fact, I'm sure many of you have been on this happens to me all the time, right? I get on a phone with somebody and say, hey, I just sent you an email. Have you got it yet? And they may be waiting and saying, no, I haven't gotten it. And I'm just thinking, wow, how come it's taking so long? But can you imagine if we didn't have, the internet and the network that enabled the fast throughput of this electronic messaging? It would have taken a long time for the pony to, run across the continent to deliver a piece of mail. Okay, so and this evolution also includes, the expressive dimension, perceptual dimension, and that goes toward things like, the speech and the facial and the physical cues. That's stuff that, you might see me on the screen talking and, I got my background. You sort of get a sense as to the facial features, when we do it over Zoom. And it's hard because I got the screen sharing and I really can't see everybody. So it's hard to tell, how you're reacting to this. But, if you're kind of in a face-to-face arrangement, you can sort of keep track of people's ability to, are they paying attention? Are they, are you losing them? Do they look like they're falling asleep or something? So anyway, those are the expressive and perceptual dimension. And again, I think we've all come to this sort of common understanding that certain facial features or certain body language could be interpreted, in one way or another. Okay. So let's take a look at this particular chart here. We got space-time, and then you got the expressive. It's just another way of looking at how, we've evolved to be this sophisticated communicator. The space-time is the co-location. The synchronous, is the same shared time, same shared place. And then expressive perceptual dimension, that's the speech, how you listen, how you interpret the kind of intonation and voice delivery that we're communicating. You got the facial expression, how does a person look when they're talking? How does the audience or the other person that you're talking to transmitting any kind of message, how do they appear? And then body language. The body language is another kind of key feature of delivering a particular message. So getting into this is some of the details and nuances of this naturalness. In a face-to-face conversation, you typically would have a heightened state of attention. You are in the same space and time, and you're probably in relatively close proximity. So there's a kind of a keen emotional awareness. And then you have this synchronous conversation, and there's nonverbal expression. So there's a lot of hidden cues that convey, what the message might be. And keep in mind, the message, even in the act of delivering it, can evolve. So, you might start off maybe it's a tense moment, and then as the conversation proceeds, there's ways of maybe bringing the intensity of that conversation to a more calmer state. And so some of the expression may change as a result of bringing the intensity down another level. So a lot of this is happening over the time that the conversation is taking place. So lots of things are happening at the same time. There's this sort of shared emotion that could range from anything from joy, anger, excitement, anything that you might feel as a result of interacting with others, and then feel emotion of others. This is something that they call the mirror neuron, and I think you can imagine it by how you might look at yourself in the mirror, and you can see the reflection of how you might appear and feel. But then when somebody is talking to you and somebody is expressing love or expressing anger, there's a certain transmittal that takes place, and that's the thing that triggers sort of these mirror neurons, that anger could trigger some anger response in you, and then that becomes kind of like the state of emotion that you both are in. So that's kind of a this sort of mirror neuron phenomena. What is when I was reading this and thinking about it, sometimes you can catch yourself and make sure that if somebody is approaching sort of this interaction with anger, and it's somehow it's also being affecting your disposition. If you can observe that and try to make sure that you can keep your sense of emotion calm, then you can help to kind of diffuse two angry people taking it to another level, which oftentimes might be might result in something kind of detrimental. So it's kind of what you'll also read as we go through this book. It describes some of these natural conditions and things like this mirror phenomenon, but it also kind of brings some attention to what you might need to do in order to diffuse or complement or be empathetic, to the way some of these communicating items might be transmitted. I hope that kind of makes sense. But that's kind of how we're having this chapter sort of describe the naturalness, and how does this naturalness translate into computer mediated environments. And then the last thing on this one is emotional attunement, cognitive connection. So this diagram, I think, what's this diagram? It's on I'm looking at the book here. Okay, it's on page 33. You have this space-time dimension, you have collocation. So in the middle, you have all these kind of the natural things that are happening, from face-to-face conversation, this mirror neurons, you have these cognitive connections. And then as you go further out of the circles, it becomes less natural. And I think the point of this is that taking the face-to-face in the real world in a synchronous environment is kind of like the basis for comparison. As you move further away from that, and moving further away from that could be anything that's on the on the left-hand side, which is your email, which is asynchronous, limited nonverbal, less feedback. You got, texting and personal texts, asynchronous feedback. You got phone calls; those are synchronous. You have the vocal, and you have the ability to transmit some of the emotional feeling, through the phone call. And then you got video conferencing, like these Zoom calls where we're sort of all together, sharing kind of a visual audio synchronous experience. So this is another way of looking at how these particular characteristics kind of like lay out in sort of this graphic format. And then these naturalness affects the communications. You have, depending on which platform you might be talking about, whether it's email or text or video. As even when you're doing face to face, I mean, you can have ambiguity. You might, there may be some. I guess maybe one example would be kind of like cultural. I often hear, like, if you go to Japan and you let's say you say something, and you invite someone, or you ask something of someone, and the response is yes, but they actually mean no. So there's, even in face to face, there's kind of this communication ambiguity. But you can imagine that if you're talking about asynchronous and computer mediated over non-visual platforms like email, you could have a lot more kind of ambiguity. You have this cognitive schema, and cognitive schema, that's just another way of looking at how to break down, what it is that you're trying to understand. What does it say here? It says, it says in this chapter on 34, page 34, it says, the cognitive schema: through evolution, our brains have developed specialized brain circuits designed for information processing. And over the millions of years, these brain circuits have developed into increasingly automatic and unconscious cognitive schema that process the speech patterns, vocal tones, facial expressions, body language of conversational communication. So in a nutshell, it's just, the schema of how we ultimately understand what somebody might be saying. So, and that's what the schema is. And then you have cognitive learning and effort, adaptation, and this sort of cognitive schema alignment, which is, if you say something and you're saying it to somebody else, are they on the same kind of wavelength? And sometimes they may not be on the same wavelength. So how do you achieve any kind of schema alignment? So, breaking it down a little further, you got schema, effort, learning, adaptation, and alignment. So the schema is the built-in routine cognitive schema, which reduces the communication effort. Because if you have certain things that you understand to be communicating something like joy or fear or anger, that's sort of built into that schema. That's, a combination of, let's say, the tone of the voice, or the facial expression, or, various things, characteristics that would indicate, let's say, anger. You have this cognitive effort. You develop new schema, adapt to less natural computer-mediated communication. So as you start to, look at the effectiveness of text or effectiveness of email, how does it support whatever cognitive schema you might be used to? And this is where it gets kind of interesting, right? If you, I find this oftentimes, you might get a text. I I think one example is, like if you get something like in all caps, that might indicate somebody kind of like shouting. And that's something that, from a medium standpoint, you kind of have to get used to. I think initially, when we type out a sentence, we typically start with a capital letter and then everything is lowercase. But then, if it's all in caps, it implies something. Normally, you wouldn't do that. But as we've gotten more and more used to that kind of environment, and we see something all in caps, what that usually now indicates is somebody kind of like yelling. So anyway, that's just an example of this, cognitive effort and what the new schema might look like if you're using something like text. So this idea of learning in this new schema requires effort. So like anything, right? So if I took me a little while to get used to those kinds of text communications, that's the sort of like the new effort that is required. If you go on to some of these chat rooms or like Twitch, and there's a whole sort of sequence of kind of ASCII characters that people are using for either ASCII art or some other form of communication, that also takes a little time to get used to. The other thing, and I guess you could see it in Zoom and other video conferences. You can see it in like TikTok Live, where you can have a whole bunch of hearts streaming by just kind of continually clicking on the heart. That's another sort of interpretive messaging that can get communicated, and it means something, but it takes a little bit of effort to understand, like, okay, what does that mean? And of course, I think normally it would be understood relatively quickly, but as any new platform, somebody has to try it and somebody has to do it, and then it gets kind of like learned. It's like a learned thing, and then everybody starts doing it. So that's kind of what I noticed on TikTok. You got this cognitive adaptation. Less natural computer-mediated communications medium requires adaptation, and so like any of these text-based tools, that's why I think emojis are kind of popular, given that it provides another form of communicating a message. And then you got this schema alignment, and it sometimes requires some effort to kind of understand what's being conveyed here. And I know for a fact that probably many of you in this class have a language of your own, amongst your peers that it's kind of unique. And I think that's kind of an interesting evolutionary thing. As these new platforms get used by, a new generation of users, there's always kind of a new thing that results from it. Now this one you can find it on, let's see what, this is on page 36. So again, looking at, face-to-face in the middle, where we're basing most of this analysis on. And then as you go out, further out in the circle, you have some of these other features, that represent some of the computer-mediated communication forms. And as you go along, kind of around the circle, like on that top left quadrant, you see this communication ambiguity. You have speech, nonverbal cues. If you go clockwise, you have this compensatory adaptation, schema alignment, cognitive effort. These are basically all looking at the CMC and trying to understand, how does it actually compare back to, the sort of like the standard face-to-face communication. And again, it's different, but again, that's kind of the world and the tools that we now have access to, and it's kind of important just to understand, the nuances of each platform, and one will do better or worse than the other. And what we will end up doing, I think for the most part, is we will all end up using a whole variety of these tools just because they're all very easy to access, and it's probably true that many of you, grew up with all of this, kind of at your fingertips. So as we get into some of the fact that, we've been in this environment for kind of many years now, I've had the fortune to sort of see the development of it, and having gone through COVID and seeing the fact that, Zoom went from not even being known very much before COVID to something that everybody pretty much uses all the time. There's this sort of video conference exhaustion, and the chapter kind of goes into, what happens that causes this kind of exhaustion. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but we are doing this class, between 12 and 1 o'clock. So it's kind of like lunch hour. And to be honest, I don't mind if you guys eat lunch. If you get hungry, you got to eat, right? It's kind of hard for me to eat lunch because I'm talking, but I would probably, and what I typically do is I, grab something to eat beforehand. But with that said, so that's just class. But if you were in a business environment and you were on a Zoom call, I'm curious to hear, and I'll take this as part of your participatory response. I'm curious to hear if you were in a meeting that took place at, let's say, I don't know, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, how would you feel about somebody eating during that meeting? And it's a work meeting. So anybody want to chime in and tell me what you might sort of feel about that?
I think if it was like a work meeting, I think it's more so unprofessional just because I think throughout school, college, you kind of learn how to have professionalism, whether it's online or in person. So I feel like there should be like an understanding that it's unprofessional, unless it's like you're told like it's okay like that you can eat. But other than that, if it's not said, then I would think it's unprofessional.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. That's good feedback. Anybody else on that idea of, you got a business meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, kind of early? What is your sense of, whether that's appropriate or not?
Does it apply to how you dress?
Oh yeah, we'll get to that too. Tell me what you think about appearance.
I think you have to be, especially if it's a video conference, it's definitely got to have a sense of appearance, especially physically. When you go to the mainland like that, we usually wear a suit.
Now, okay, so we're all on this Zoom, right? We're all on video, and part of the chapter also, it mentions about eating. It mentions a little bit about how you dress. It also mentions a little bit about how you appear. on the video itself. So Ken, I thought that was kind of kind of funny that you would bring up appearance because I could only see like your nose. I don't know if you see yourself in the video, but it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird if you're having this sort of video interaction, and the main feature that I see is like your nose.
I cannot see myself here. I should turn it on. So I'm only looking at the PowerPoint slide here.
Oh, okay. Well, if you so again, all I'm saying is that as we look at these different tools, right, and we look at this idea of again taking it back to what this chapter is about, naturalness. Typically, like if you're in the room, right, you're looking at each other's face. You're you're not staring down each other or anything, but you're having a typical kind of interaction. You're looking at their face. But if you're on a video and you're not, naturally conscientious about how you appear. Now, I'll give an example. Like, if you look at some of these influencers, they're very conscientious about how they appear on the video, and they make it a point that the lighting is good. They make it a point that their audio is good. They make it a point that they have pretty much their whole head, that you can see, and that goes with being somewhat conscientious of your appearance. Now, if you look at newscasters are good at this. They're very conscientious about how they appear, and I noticed, I used to do this thing on Hawaii News Now, and I would say something, and then it would pan over to somebody else. Like usually, the person that was interviewing, me and a buddy of mine was Billy V, and Billy V would say something. The camera would move to him, and then I would still be in camera, but then I wouldn't necessarily be talking. But I started to look at what did I appear to look like if I didn't, I wasn't the one talking. And I noticed that you might naturally kind of like not frown purposely, but you wouldn't necessarily be smiling. You would just, I would be looking like something like this, so it would be like, oh, is he frowning or not? And so I was sort of conscious about that. And so I would try to at least, even if I'm not talking on a Zoom, try to be conscientious of how it is that I appear. So I would I would actually, when how Zoom calls end, and you just want to make sure that how you appear is satisfactory, put on a smile, even if it doesn't, if it might not feel like it's required, but you're still on video, and that does transmit kind of a subconscious message. And I think the internet and Zoom and video and has at least kind of made me more conscientious about stuff like that. And so I just bring that up, in in the form of this class, because you might all think, oh yeah, this is just a class, and we're just talking about stuff like media naturalness. But over time, as you figure out how these tools become part of your tool chest, you're going to start thinking about, well, how do I best use these tools as not only a vehicle to convey a message, but how does it convey, kind of like you as a person. Does that kind of make sense?
In the old days, the instructors used to wear neck and tie.
Well, at least I got a collar on.
to show that they're in charge.
Well, okay, so going back to what we were talking about. Yeah, appearance. Okay, so we're in this Zoom call, right? And the setting is it's a business call. And I've been on business calls where people are working from home, okay? So, and many of you in this class might be doing remote work. But what is the appropriate appearance for a remote worker? And I would say that, and again, you have to experience this on your own, but there is sort of a business attire. And are you kind of like maintaining that business attire? Now, if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm at home, man, I can wear my bust up t-shirt or whatever, because I'm still I'm at home, but I'm working at home. But if you're on a Zoom call and you've got business colleagues, and some of them might be in the office, or some, they might be in business attire. So what's the appropriate attire? And I've been on kind of like business Zoom calls, and somebody might have just got out of a shower, and their hair's all. I mean, they're like one step from having a towel wrapped around their head. Like, is that appropriate? I don't know. I mean, anyway, so those are some things that you might start to think about, whether the medium is conducive to certain things, and as you compare it to face to face, or in this face to face example of a business meeting, what is appropriate. Now, if you were in a business conference room and you came in with the towel wrapped around your head, I mean, that kind of doesn't quite work, right? Anyway, so that's it's something to think about. So again, getting back to this video conference exhaustion, there is this sort of environment now where sometimes this professionalism starts to kind of like fray at the edges, given that you're working at home. You have this, again, eating and doing other kind of stuff, and the other thing that it mentions is the idea of, and that's why I say, put your camera on, so at least we got a sense of who you are and what you're doing. But if somebody, like I'm looking at like Jolie on this camera, and I can only see like the top of your head. Now I don't need to see your whole face, but I'm just giving you an example. And if you look at kind of like how are you kind of projecting yourself in these kinds of environments? Yeah, I mean, it sort of says a lot, right? So
I gotta wait a little bit wear out, but if communication ever gets really good, then the people can read your mind while you're communicating. So if somebody said something really you don't like it, in your own mind you said, "Oh, that guy's a bullshitter."
Well,
then,
okay. Wait, let's get real now, because
eventually,
you're hypothesizing that we can get to the point where we can read minds, and I don't think that's a reality. What I do think is that based on your expression, I can sort of get a sense as to how you might be feeling or reacting to what it is I say, and that that comes through practice, through kind of face-to-face interaction, and that's what I would respond.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is just the there was something else I wanted to bring up about this sort of video conference exhaustion. Well, it'll come to me, but I just wanted to, kind of share some of these thoughts, and I like the interaction we just had. Okay, and then so these are more environmental conditions, and we're I know what I wanted to say. So it also mentions in the chapter about I'm not, I like you guys to turn your cameras on just so we can sort of get to know you a little better. But I've been at meetings where people don't turn their cameras on, and you can never tell whether they're even paying attention or not. And they could be. Now, I don't have anything against multitasking, and maybe there's important things you got to do, and you got to check your email and do whatever, right? But if you're totally like disengaged, and to the extent where you don't have your camera on, and you don't even know if the person's paying attention or not, that kind of it has another sort of effect on how that medium is conveying a message. Now, in this case, where I'm kind of like doing all the talking and then trying to convey, information about this chapter, that's kind of a one-way thing. But if I'm encouraging your participation, and like people are on camera or off camera, it sort of adds to the mystery of, are they actually paying attention? Are they multitasking? Are they doing something else? Are they focused on what it is that I'm saying? And what it is I'm saying may or may not be, that important. But the fact is, we're in this class, and for the time that we're in this class, it's good to have this sort of discussion around this particular topic. But anyway, so that whole point is one of the reasons you have the camera on is because it's a better way to assess whether people are actually like paying attention or not. Anyway, so that's what this co-location issue sort of talks a little bit about that too, right? So whether it's the lighting or the camera angles, seeing only tops of heads, that's something that the author brings up. Face too close to the camera, and I've seen that, right? I mean, there's a good distance to be, and it's kind of like a social distance, right? But if you're too close, it's like you're like that's really kind of like in your face kind of situation. Anyway, so these are some examples of what people encounter as a result of spending all this time on a platform like Zoom. You got these nonverbal cues: sitting too close to the camera, staring at the screen, self-conscious, seeing your own image on the screen, viewing repetitive gestures. One of the things that I don't know. I mean, I would agree that I've had to get used to the idea of seeing myself on the camera, but I typically wouldn't necessarily want to do a video call. I'm more accustomed to like a phone call or a voice call. But nowadays, given the fact that I think everybody has Zoom calls every day, you kind of get used to it. So I would probably say that over time you'll get used to it too. Speech, right? Can you guys hear me okay? I'm just using my AirPods, but typically I think the environment, I want to minimize any background noise. I want to make sure that you guys hear me okay. Make sure that the microphone works. It's kind of always kind of funny when you're in a meeting and people don't remember that they got to unmute themselves. So that's always something that it can be a little, like it kind of breaks the continuity of what people are talking about. So you got to wait for the person to realize, oh, they're not, they got to unmute their microphone. So anyway, these are some of the kind of the situations that we will encounter that contributes to some of this, fatigue. In practice, This one example, you guys can read it. It's about, the software agreements and whether or not watching a video or reading a written agreement is better. What they found was that even though watching a video might have been more conducive to people actually, having some time to spend on a software agreement, found a video to be less, had less information that was important that was conveyed, and ultimately ended up having to really read the software agreement to get to the nuances. So point being that sometimes certain means of communications, like a contract, right? It's probably better to read the contract than it is to have a video about the contract, which might, lose some of the meaning, the true meaning of it. And then, this is just kind of a comparison of when you start to analyze media naturalness versus the idea of media richness. One tends to be a little bit more about us as humans, the media, the naturalness, and then the media richness tends to be a little bit more about the features of that medium itself. Whether it's text or email or social media or Zoom. Again, this is just a little deeper dive into what I just said of naturalness versus the media richness, and how this particular author kind of differentiates between the two, which is good. It's a similar continuum as media richness, constraints on the human instead of the medium, which is what the naturalness is about. It's about the human instead of the medium. Alludes to learning. Speech is imperative. In practice, more proficient. Medium is more natural. It places the communication agency in the person. So the naturalness is really kind of the naturalness of the person, and it compares the CMC cognitive effort to face-to-face. So, kind of in essence, that's this particular chapter, and I thought this was pretty good in terms of breaking it down and understanding, some of the what is it that makes the medium more natural. And again, the natural is tied to how does it comport to our nature? How does it affect our ability to communicate as something that came out of natural evolution of we as human beings. So anyway, that's the gist of this chapter. I thought interesting stuff. Any questions that you might have about this? I'll go ahead and stop sharing here.
I was just wondering when the quizzes will be made available.
So if you go to the Active Cognella site, you should be able to see them now. So if any of you are, where's my Cognella site? Here it is. So if any of you are in Cognella, go to assignments, and in assignments, you should go down to chapter 2, and you should see hold on. If you go down to chapter 2, yeah, you should see multiple choice and true and false. So those are accessible and viewable. And so if you take those, then that'll go toward your grade, for this particular chapter. And I've left it so that you can take it a couple times. So if you take it, if you wanted to try to get a better grade on it, you can take it twice. But yes, you certainly can do that on the first chapter.
And chapter 2 quizzes aren't available on.
Say that again.
Chapter 2 quizzes aren't available on Cognola.
Yeah, like the assignments aren't there.
It's showing as available on my screen. Can you, Julia, take a screenshot of that and then send it to me? And then I'll take a look, because what I do on my side is I make them available. Okay. So try and refresh. Maybe it didn't take, the first time, and maybe refreshing might make it available. But so again, you should be able to see the multiple choice quiz and the true and false quiz. Okay. Now, if any of you do not see that, take a screenshot and send it to me, and then I'll make sure that you'll be able to access it. But as far as I know right now, I've made those two accessible, so you should be able to access it.
Are you referring to for chapter 1 or chapter 2?
I'm talking about chapter 2.
Okay.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, on my end, we can't even see chapter 2. You see chapter 1, you see the flashcards, fill in the blank quiz, multiple choice quiz, true or false quiz. Do we do chapter 1 discussion or no?
No, see, what I inadvertently did is I made more things available on chapter 1. And my correction is that the only things that I'm going to really be grading on is the multiple choice and the true and false. Those are only two things. So all the other stuff, the discussion or flashcards or whatever, you don't have to worry about that. The only two things is the quiz, multiple choice quiz, and the true and false.
Okay. And then, so
I'm looking at the screen.
Then there's no chapter 2 or chapter 3 listed, at least for me. It just goes down to chapter 4 and then 5, and it just has their flashcards.
Really?
Yeah, we have the chapter fill in the blank quiz, multiple choice quiz, true or false quiz, and discussion, reflection, but then there's no chapter 2.
Okay. Let me. Okay, so what you're saying is that you don't even see a chapter 2 set of selections?
Yes, I just sent you a screenshot.
Okay, let me see. Oh, here we go. Okay, those are the chapter 1 stuff, yeah? Oh, and it. Okay, let me try to figure out what's going on. I'll try to fix this afternoon. Any other questions? Appreciate the feedback. And again, if you encounter this problem, email me. But thanks, Julia. I'll try to figure out what's going on here. You're looking at modules.
I was gonna add we don't, or at least on my end, I don't have a tab that says assignments. It just said the way I see all the quizzes is under courses, and then the modules. There is no thing that says assignments. I don't know if that helps you fix it.
Yeah, let me Well, let me look at what oh, okay. Wait now. Okay, try look at it now. Try refresh and see if you see the true and false and multiple choice for chapter 2.
Now we can, yeah.
Okay. I figured it out. Thanks. I had to activate it in 2 places. So I had it activated in assignments, and then I got to activate it in modules. So it should now be activated in for chapter 2. Okay. Appreciate it.
Supposed to submit chapter 1 stuff, right?
Yeah, and again, chapter 1 stuff has all this other stuff that's viewable, but the only thing that I'm going to be paying attention to is the multiple choice and the true and false.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You guys all good? Thanks. And then so Thursday we have a guest speaker. He's a really cool guy. His name is James Pakele, and I think you guys will have a good time hearing his talk. So I'll see you all on Thursday. Have a good next couple of days. See you soon. Aloha.
Thank you.
See you on Thursday.
And sorry, I was only showing my head. It's because the back of my room is really messy. So under this, you can see my messy countertop. So sorry.
Okay.
I'll be better next time.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.